Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are defending Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. It looks like this game has been omitted from a pretty important list going into next year, and I think it's actually pretty disrespectful to both Nintendo and its developers. And essentially, this just really speaks to the idea that there are still many people who are sleeping on Metroid Prime 4, and there isn't really much data to support this thinking. When we look at the kind of data we do have, all the evidence suggests that we should indeed be excited about this game, at least in comparison to other games that were on this list. So today we're going to be breaking down just how ridiculous this omission is, but also diving further into the otherworldly potential of Metroid Prime 4. This is a big deal game. This is a game we should be anticipating, and I think a lot of people are really underestimating just how special this release is going to be. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So the offenders this time around are the Golden Joystick Awards. Their voting is live, and for most wanted game, they have a variety of games here. They have Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Sid Meier's Civilization 7, Fable, Skate, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Deadlock, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Light No Fire, Doom, The Dark Ages, Monster Hunter Wilds, Death Stranding 2, On the Beach, King Come Deliverance 2, Mafia, The Old Country, Ghost of Yotei, Atomfall, Hollow Knight, Silksong, Slay the Spire 2, South of Midnight, Grand Theft Auto 6, and Exodus. And let me be clear, there are many exciting, amazing games on this list. What I'm talking about today isn't meant to take anything away from any of the games on this list. But what you might have noticed, there wasn't a single Nintendo title in this list. Nintendo is considered to be one of the best developers in the industry. Oftentimes by many different award shows, including even the Golden Joystick Awards, Nintendo has been suggested to be the best developer or publisher for a year. And yet here we are, going to 2025, where we're expecting a huge launch from Nintendo with the Switch 2, and not a single game is in this list. Now you could say, well, Nintendo hasn't revealed the Switch 2. We don't know about all the games that are coming to the console, and that is true. But we do know about two huge titles coming out next year, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Pokemon Legends ZA, and neither of these games are included in this list. That seems kinda fishy to me. Now looking at the last few years of awards, what you'll start to notice is that there seems to be only like one Nintendo win every year. So here, Nintendo Game of the Year, Tears of the Kingdom, that's the only Nintendo game in the 2023 awards. What about 2022? Most Wanted Game, Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo Game of the Year, Legends Arceus. Huh, interesting. Legends Arceus won Nintendo Game of the Year, but Legends ZA isn't even in the Most Wanted list. That's very curious, I might say. But beyond those, nothing Nintendo. Okay, what about 2021? Well, we got Best Nintendo Game of the Year in Metroid Dread, but that's it. Most of the time, for this particular award show, if there is a Nintendo game, it's because, well, there has to be at least one because of Nintendo Game of the Year. And yet there's no other Nintendo wins in the last few years, for the most part. Which to me, I find highly curious. The Smash, that's the Nintendo Game of the... Okay, alright. So, I just think that this is odd. Now, obviously, people are entitled to their own opinions, but these are votes, and if you're not even going to include the games that have been announced for next year in the Most Wanted list that are the biggest Nintendo games from Nintendo that are currently known for next year, they're kind of being set up here. Now you might say, well, maybe just all the games on the list are more exciting than Metroid Prime 4 and Legends ZA, and there is certainly some level of subjectivity there, but neither of these games are in this list. Looking at some of the games here, I think you can make an objective argument that there is clearly an injustice. I just mentioned that Legends Arceus has been in the award show before, but the follow-up to Legends Arceus, Legends ZA, will not. And I don't think the argument should be about sales potential here, but if it is, Pokemon should absolutely be there. In terms of quality, Legends Arceus is actually one of the higher reviewed Pokemon games of the generation. It's considered to be a good game, and this kind of review score is actually in line with a lot of games on this list. Games that are in the 80s on Metacritic are the kind of games that are in the award show. Maybe it won't win Game of the Year, but it could be at least in that conversation depending on the year, and it's at least likely to win or be nominated for certain other smaller awards within the show. So looking at all this, I am kind of thinking that there might be a little bit of a anti-Nintendo bias here. But let's focus on Metroid Prime 4, because Pokemon, I love it, but being real here, Pokemon is not nearly to the same quality as the Metroid series. It's not close. Metroid's one of the highest quality series there is. It's one of the best Nintendo has to offer. Sales aren't there, but the quality certainly is, and these award shows aren't about sales. They're about how good the game is. And so if you want to have an argument with me about, oh, Metroid Prime 4 is not going to be a big seller, we can have that argument, but in terms of this subject for today, I don't really think it's even relevant. But just taking a look at the list, just looking at some of the games here, absolutely, these games deserve to be here. They're all likely to be pretty interesting games, good fun games. Maybe a few end up not being as good as expected, but you don't know until they come out. That's why we want them now, we anticipate them, we hope they'll be good. But looking at something, say like, for example, Atomfall. Looking at the gameplay for Atomfall, it does look interesting. But it is kind of slow paced in comparison to say something like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. But of course these are just two different types of games, and that's totally fine. But Atomfall, the developer for Atomfall is Rebellion Games. And you look at some of the games that have come out recently, like Sniper Elite 5 on Metacritic, a 77. Okay, well what about Evil Genius 2, a 75? These are some of the recent games from this developer. So the pedigree for Atomfall isn't nearly as good as it is for Metroid Prime 4, but Metroid Prime 4 is not on the list, yet Atomfall is. If you don't believe me, I mean, let's just look at some of the prior Retro Studios games. They released Metroid Prime Remastered last year, and how did it review? It has a 94 Metacritic, 100 critical reviews. It's gotten a Metacritic must play. It was one of the highest reviewed games of the year, not just for Nintendo, but period. And also by contrast, some of the games from Rebellious Games, like 60 critical reviews, 59 critical reviews. Metroid Prime Remastered was a more known game, which is why there are more critical reviews, yet the next game that this developer is working on is featured, but Metroid Prime 4 is not. And you might say, well, it's just a game we've been waiting a very long time for. Okay, well then, why is there Hollow Knight Silksong? Which, by the way, I don't even think it has a release date for next year. Like, I think it's probably coming out next year, but I also thought that for this year and the year prior, as many other people have. We just don't know what's going on with this game. This game can make the list, but not Metroid Prime, which I find ironic considering the genre. But it's not even just Metroid Prime. Every game Retro Studios has produced has been very good. Let's go back to their prior game. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze was a highly reviewed game. Many people have argued that this game is one of the best 2D platformers ever made. Donkey Kong Country Returns was also amazing. All the Metroid Prime games have reviewed extremely well. Maybe you might want to look at Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and say, well, it just doesn't look as exciting as some of the other games on the list. I think that's a bogus perspective, but again, we're talking about subjective opinions here. Perhaps you can make that huge gymnastical stretch to believe something like that. And maybe Metroid Prime 4 isn't going to be a significant evolution for the series. Maybe it's essentially going to be just a modern day version of Metroid Prime 3, just continuing the story, which I think is really lowballing what this game is going to be. But if that is the case, Metroid Prime 3, when it came out, was also a highly reviewed game by Retro Studios, a must-play for Metacritic. 90 was fantastic. From a quality perspective, Prime 3 was at least in the Game of the Year conversation. So a continuation of a game like that should absolutely be in the conversation for Most Wanted Game. And if the list was just like 4 or 5 games, maybe I could see how you could exclude it, but there are several games out there. It's a big list. They could have included Metroid Prime 4. Just to point out another example, Skate 4 is on this list, right? And you look at Skate 3, an 80 on Metacritic. That's pretty good. And that's the kind of game that makes it on this list, a follow-up to a high-quality game that had a decent audience. So if Skate 4 can be on there, how is it that Metroid Prime 4 can't? That doesn't make any real sense to me at all. And for those that want to argue, well, maybe it's just because we've been waiting a long time. Well, okay, well, Skate 3 came out 2010. Metroid Prime 3 came out in 2007. Like, the gaps are kind of similar here. I think the case isn't made. Metroid Prime 4 has just been unfairly excluded or omitted for whatever reason. And also Pokemon Legends ZA, which to me doesn't really make any sense. But of course, I am a hardcore Nintendo fan, but I feel like I've already made a pretty good argument here. Like, I'm not saying yes, I do have a Nintendo bias, but even excluding that, you just look at the reviews, look at the sales potential, you look at the popularity, like, there's not really any reason Pokemon and Metroid should have been excluded from this list. So I'm very curious on what you guys make of these omissions here. But let's now transition into speaking on the potential of these games, mostly Metroid, but I'll briefly mention Pokemon because we have discussed it. Legends ZA is a follow-up to Legends Arceus, which is one of the best Pokemon games in years. I think this time around, following that formula, expanding on it, they're likely to have a bit more of a polished experience, and they're taking more time to put this one out as opposed to the other one, which is why we're not seeing it this year, but sometime next year. I think that all bodes well for the quality of the game. It's going to be a good game. How good? We shall see. But when it comes to Metroid Prime 4, I think it's clear that this is a big deal effort from Nintendo. The game was announced to be in development back in 2017. Yes, they had to restart the development, and they announced that back in January of 2019. But we're already in October of 2024. The game has had a very long development cycle. Even if you exclude the first 2 years, the development cycle is something comparable to The Legend of Zelda. We have seen Retro Studios continually hire high-profile AAA developers throughout this entire time. They've been building up a team here. Kensuke Tanabe is the producer, and he has quite a good history of producing quality games. And while Nintendo hasn't fully dived into massively marketing this game yet, they've just given us the one trailer. This one trailer came at the very end of the June Nintendo Direct, the only big Direct we've gone for this year, a big general. And this Direct included the likes of a new 2D Zelda, the biggest Mario Party ever, the return of the Mario & Luigi series. All those games are big important games for this holiday, but the game that they had to close the show was Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I think that absolutely says something. Typically, the kinds of games that close shows are those high caliber, high quality kinds of games. What are the kinds of games that Nintendo has used to close Nintendo Directs? Mario Wonder, Tears of the Kingdom, Super Smash Bros., Splatoon, Animal Crossing, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, those kinds of games. Some of the highest reviewed games of the generation. That's the slot that Nintendo put Metroid Prime 4 in. So I do think Nintendo is putting it out there that this is a big game. This is a high quality game. Regardless of how it sells, this is going to be a very high quality game that Retro Studios is working very hard on for a very long time. And just thinking about how this game might evolve for Metroid Prime 3, let's say we lowball things here, and it's essentially just like a direct sequel to Metroid Prime 3. This game is being made for more powerful hardware than the Nintendo Wii. Yes, Switch is underpowered hardware for this current time, but it's still leaps and bounds more powerful than when they had available back during the GameCube and Wii era when they were making the prior Metroid Prime games. And with Metroid Prime 3, they really tried to expand on the scope of the Prime games. You could do different things with your ship, you were exploring different planets, there were large-scale battles going on involving many different characters. And from what we see of Prime 4, the opening shot is essentially something like that, but it looks even better given the new hardware. But what's also exciting is that when these prior Metroid Prime games were made, first-person games, first-person adventures and shooters, the genre was still relatively young. Since then, there have been so many first-person games, and many strides have been made in terms of movement and just overall gameplay. I think a lot of those concepts could go into modernizing Prime 4. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they modernize Prime 4. But I also do think that Prime 4 is going to go beyond. I do think they're going to make something bigger than just a straight up sequel to Prime 3, which it will literally be. But I think it's going to feel like something that's a bit of an evolution for the series. I do believe that they are going to look at the overall formula of Metroid and try and position it a bit differently so it appeals to a larger audience. And I'm not trying to say that they're going to ruin the Metroid Prime formula. I simply think they're going to think of ways to make it better for a larger audience. Think like Pikmin 4. I don't think many people are going to say that Pikmin 4 took away from the Pikmin formula, but they made it inviting to a larger audience. I think the same is going to apply for Prime 4. For example, they could add fast travel points which did not exist in prior Prime games. Maybe there will be larger areas that Samus can explore, and perhaps with these larger areas there are going to be more ways to move around the environment. Maybe Samus will use her ship, perhaps we'll have more opportunities to use her speed booster, perhaps she'll have animals that she can ride on that kind of makes sense for the setting. With modernized controls, I think there's also going to be a lot more opportunity with the combat. I think with prior Prime games, because there was a lot of focus on adventure, which I believe there absolutely will still be, the combat took a little bit of a back seat. I think this time around the combat will be a bit more varied. And actually, considering Prime 3, they're already doing some things like that, how you could use your grapple beam to like pull off shields and stuff, for example. It wasn't just circling around and shooting your enemies, so I think they will expand on that as well. And also, at least from the trailer, what they show with Sylux, it does feel like the story is going to be strong, which is also very exciting. So I absolutely believe in the potential of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I do think this is going to be a big deal game. I do think it's going to be one of the best games of the year. And I don't feel shy in saying that this game is likely going to review better than most of the games on this most wanted list for the Joystick Awards. Will it surpass all of them? Well, when you have something like Grand Theft Auto 6, that seems unlikely, but then also, not everyone's even sure that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to make it out next year. But regardless, I think Metroid's going to be in that conversation. I think it's going to be an amazing game. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.